Hi everybody, Adam Steele here, and this is the Reaper 101 guide. Welcome back. This particular episode is about automation. Let's say you've got all your tracks and everything and they're looking pretty cool, but now you want to change stuff in real time. You want the volumes to go up and down, you want things to move side to side, you want things to just be a little louder and a little quieter in separate parts. That's automation, and that's what we're going to look at today. Before we do, I'm quickly going to talk about the Ultimate Reaper Guide from Pro Mix Academy, because it's something that I've done that is available down in the description that covers all of this stuff in huge detail, right from the start, from starting to turn the DAW on and get going, all the way through to the really cool advanced stuff, the extra plugins, the free stuff, the really kind of clever automated processes, and I also take you through a recording and a mix start to finish to show you how I work in Reaper and how all the cool stuff benefits me. So without further blabbering, on we go. So here we have the project in front of us that we've been working on for most of this series, and now let's say that I want things to move. This is where we start to look at these little buttons that appear for automation. On a regular track, if we want to edit certain parameters, we need to look for the button for envelopes. Now on the mixer window, we can see this little button on a track, let's say music 1, because that's quite a simple track with no effects on it. And there is a little button here, that is the track envelopes. If we click on that, it gives us an option set where we can show and hide and get ready a lot of these tracks. So if we click volume, we see a volume envelope appear. Now if I make this a little bigger, what happened there is the volume on this track was down at around, well, exactly minus 12.7 dB. So now the volume has jumped back to 0 and the envelope has become minus 12.7. And so they've switched places. We're now in what's called trim mode. So anything we do to the volume on this line will affect the volume. But then afterwards, the fader now is an overall kind of, well, a trim. So let's say that we make this bigger. I'm going to add some points on here. If I press different buttons on the keyboard, I get different options. Like if I shift or double click, I can double click to shift and click to add a point. If I had lots of points on here, you can see how nothing's actually changed, but we've got lots of points. But I can now grab each point and I can make them bigger, smaller, and so on, however I choose. And I can grab in between points to grab a bar and move that up. So now you should see when I hit play, the volume of this will go up, then down, then up. Now that volume is going up and down as we expected. The fader is not moving because that fader is a second layer, as a trim layer. If we want to change that, I can change my automation type on this track so that the automation mode, which is currently trim read, I can change to just read. And that will now read the automation. You can see how our fader just went green. And now if I hit play or move the playhead around, you'll see it move to match what's on screen. That's good for visual feedback, but that is then locked essentially. If I try and move that, it will snap back. So I find trims quite nice because it's an extra layer. So let's say that I've got a vocal and I wanted it louder in the verse, quieter in this section, louder in that section. And then afterwards I decide that's great, but the whole thing should be 1 dB louder maybe, or 1 dB quieter. If I change this back to trim mode, then if I trim this to be 1 dB louder on the fader, that's kept all of my automation and then just adds 1 dB to all of that. It's exactly the same with the pan, which is left and right, and the width, which is stereo and not stereo, and all these parameters that are in here. Pre-effects, volume, trim volume, you can actually automate the trim. That seems a little strange to me, but you can. And you can automate muting, which is useful if you've got a sound and you just want it to cut halfway through a song but be able to keep coming in and out as you desire. You can change automation to mute it and then maybe use a control surface or something, which we'll talk about in the last section, to change that yourself manually. Now, that window is about to get a whole lot bigger because we've not talked about effects yet. Let's talk about this particular track, the one with all the MIDI on, with the CS80 and the compressor. Just jumped over the lazy dog. This one here, because if I open up the automation here, this is going to be a much bigger window. And it's a much bigger window because below the track envelopes that we saw before, then we have receive envelopes or send envelopes. If your track has a send, you can automate that send. I do that a lot. If I've got, say, a reverb and I want a particular part of a vocal to suddenly have loads of reverb and then not have that again, or I want to really dry up a vocal for a little section, I can just automate the levels up and down. And then underneath, you can see every possible thing that can be controlled on an external plugin. So in this case, for the CS80 synth, there's all of these inputs and there's an absolute ton of them. It's dizzying. And then afterwards is the compressor recomp. So if I go right back to the start of the CS80, if I don't want to see this whole lot, there's a little minus button I can tick. That will then hide all the controls for that particular plugin. So if I don't want to see them, blah. So then we've got all the threshold and everything for the compressor. So let's just open up the compressor and say that that's the threshold there. If I go back to my automation window and bring that up, that's where it is right now. If I move this envelope that just appeared, I can hold down Command and I can free draw. That's a nice little trick. So now you'll see as we go around the jumped over the lazy dog. And now if I hit space, threshold is jumping around there as it should because it's being told to. Now, let's say we want to go the other way and in real time I want to control some of these. I can do that by changing the type of automation. So if I go back into here where we had trim read before, I could change this to just write mode. Write mode is exactly what it says. As soon as I hit play, it's then going to overwrite any possible parts of control on just this. So if I hit play now, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. And now if I hit space. Now if you could see me moving the mouse there on that threshold control, that completely overwrote all of the parts of the definition on the line here. Another cool thing that I could do, I'm going to take that back off write mode now and put it on trim read mode. We can change what's called the global automation. So I could set this to one of the modes off on the right here so that this now, if I change any parameters on anything whilst it's playing back, that will be recorded in and kept. So if you're not much of a kind of a clicky mouse kind of person, you can do all of this in real time. So I'm going to change this to global latch mode because whilst write is a great mode, if I then went and played that back again and didn't change anything, that would then overwrite what I previously did with just that stable control, but because I'm not touching it, it goes, okay, well, I guess you didn't want it touched. With touch mode, typically, and latch mode, which is slightly different, if I now hit play, this will keep all the controls. Just jumped over the lazy dog. Now if I hit space. But if halfway through that, I then grab the control and go, no, actually, I want you now to do this, I take over and I start telling it what to do and to record thusly. Just jumped over the lazy dog. And now if I hit space. So you can see this first part here is exactly what went before, and as soon as I grabbed that mouse to start moving it, these big spikes appeared because that's what I was doing with it. So touch can be really useful in things like film production. If someone's walking across a screen and you get the volume and suddenly it's a little loud, you can then grab that fader and go, actually, no, I want that to be a little lower. And because this is on global mode, this actually affects any of these controls. If I hit play again and move something else, just jumped over the lazy dog. Now if I hit space. Now a new automation envelope lane appeared for the attack because I grabbed the attack and started moving it. And so that all the lanes are all there already. If I open up the automation envelope button again, you'll see these are all in there already, but they're not visible, they're not armed, they're not ready to go, because if you tried to put a lane on the screen for every little thing, like with this plugin with its kind of, the VST CS80 with its hundreds of parameters, that would be quite dizzying. So instead, they keep them hidden until you change something, and then suddenly you can see them all. Let's turn the global mode back to no global override. But that's how you can very quickly have it so that you can have, if you've got a control surface or something connected and all your controls are set the way they're supposed to be, you can just hit play and then start performing in changes. Another neat little trick that makes the screen a bit neater, because now we've got all these envelopes appearing, this is going to get messy quite quickly. If we hover over them, if I right click on one of these, there is a tick box here for show all visible track envelopes in media lane. And there's one next to it which is envelope lanes, which is what we're currently on. If I change that to media lane, suddenly all of the automation changes to being over the top of the MIDI or the audio signal. So that becomes one lane, which is much more digestible and much more easy to see lots of tracks on screen. I could do that again with my Music One and set that so it's all on media lanes, and that becomes a little easier to see, but sometimes a little harder to control depending on what you want it to be doing. If you want the envelope lanes to be separate so you can resize them accordingly, envelope lanes might be more appropriate for you, but if not, both ways are perfectly valid and it's very much a personal choice. So that's what you need to get going with automation. There's so much you can do with it, and in the next section we're going to use this MIDI keyboard controller here and a few other cool things to get it all moving with control surfaces and external kind of plug and play analog style. So hope you're looking forward to that. If you want to check out the real deep dives on all this kind of stuff, do check out the Ultimate Reaper Guide from Pro Mix Academy. The link is down in the description below. And until the next video, I'll see you later.